Call a meeting to order. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our regularly scheduled council meeting. I'll turn it over to Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just prior to introducing our first item on the agenda, I just wanted to note that we have an on-table item. The blue sheets are before council and at the back of the room, and we'll consider this under other business as OB1. First item this evening is a presentation pertaining to Special Olympics British Columbia. I'd like to invite Mandy Manzardo to come forward, who's here to speak about the Law Enforcement Torch Run.
So good to see you again, Mandy. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you. I actually saw each other on the weekend at a basketball tournament.
Yep. Mayor Stewart and council members. Hi, I'm Mandy, and I'm excited to tell you how Special Olympics BC has changed my life and made me a much happier person. I love sports and being active, but in high school I had to quit playing soccer. I felt excluded because I have an intellectual disability. Thankfully, my friend Kyle told me about how his great experience with Special Olympics. One day after school, I called and asked about the soccer program, and boom, I was part of a team again. Playing soccer with Special Olympics in Coquitlam was a whole new experience for me. I would get hugs and high fives when I scored a goal, and when I fell down, my teammates would pick me up and make sure I was okay. Special Olympics has helped me develop confidence and social skills. In high school, I didn't have many friends, but now with Special Olympics, I have lots of friends. After I joined Special Olympics Coquitlam, I started getting invitations to birthday parties and meeting friends for dinner. As Special Olympics athletes, we may have different disabilities, but we all treat each other with respect. Over my time with Special Olympics, I've participated in soccer, athletics, basketball, and club fit. I've had the honor of representing Canada twice at Special Olympics World Games, first in Shanghai in 2007 for soccer, and in Los Angeles in 2015 for athletics. I treasure the friendships I made during these games and still stay in touch with my teammates. My latest achievement with Special Olympics is being selected as one of 10 Special Olympic athletes from around the world to join over 100 law enforcement members running the final leg of the Law Enforcement Torch Run before the Special Olympics World Winter Games next month in Austria. We will be running the Flame of Hope around Austria in the lead up to the Games and be part of the opening ceremonies. I'm very excited to be representing Coquitlam, BC and Canada with the Law Enforcement Torch Run. I am so honored to be running in the 2017 Law Enforcement Torch Run final leg. Law Enforcement Torch Run members do so much to raise money and awareness for Special Olympics in my community and around the world. I was a little nervous when I took part in my first torch run here in the Lower Mainland, but the law enforcement members I ran with were very friendly. It was so much fun to talk to them about the amazing things they do every day. We were like a family as we ran, ate lunch, and traveled together. It is a true honor to be a part of this unified final leg team. I will be joining my torch run team in Austria and helping to raise funds for Special Olympics by taking part in the polar plunge while I am there. If you would like to pledge me, I have information on how to donate online and a collection box too. Funds raised will help to support my fellow athletes across BC. The torch run will be running through Coquitlam this year on June 8th. We hope to see you all at the barbecue again. On behalf of Special Olympics athletes and the Law Enforcement Torch Run, thank you for your time.
I'd just like to add, my name is Charlotte Taylor. I work at Special Olympics BC, and I've been working with Mandy for about the last year, and she has been training so hard for this run. she's been running 4 or 5 times a day to get fit and active and healthy and ready for this run in Austria. She'll be running for 10 days solid, and she's ready for it. She's ready to represent Coquitlam, BC, and Canada out there. So we're really proud of her. Thank you.
Well, I must say that kind of an emotional and inspirational startup is going to be the best part of this meeting. I hate to suggest that the rest of the meeting won't be as good, but thank you very much, Mandy, again, and thank you all for coming to help celebrate Special Olympics and our representative from Coquitlam heading off to Austria. Outstanding. Thank you. Now, you can stay for the rest of the meeting if you...
You already told him it doesn't get any better than that.
I'm sorry, it wasn't funny. Thank you all. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Our second item is minutes of the regular council meeting held on Monday, February 6th. Recommendation to approve.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Marsden to approve the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Oops, Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if, because Councillor O'Neill's poem is alluded to in the minutes, if it would be considered to put his poem in the minutes.
How much did he pay you? The minutes aren't normally verbatim.
We don't normally do verbatim records, but
We have video of the reading of the poem that is on our website and will be there for some time to come.
yes. And if you do want to hear the poem read out, that's probably your only opportunity, because I don't think Councillor O'Neill will be repeating it, perhaps. He wrote it down.
Sure he did.
Of course he did.
And the question is the minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. They're in the archives, exactly.
Next item, item 3, is minutes of the Economic Development Advisory Committee meeting of Wednesday, November 9th. Two-part recommendation. 1, that the minutes of the Economic Development Advisory Committee's meeting be received, and 2, that the 2017 Economic Development Advisory Committee work plan be approved.
Moved by Councillor Marsden.
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Asmundson. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. On item 2 regarding the work plan, we have Riverview on there, and I was hoping that it could be removed from the work plan, and it can stay with the Riverview Committee. If they need anything from economic development, they could probably get together and work it out. I've discussed it with the chair, and he has no problem with this, Your Worship. Last page on the back.
Are we recommending, you're moving a motion?
Recommending removing, yes.
Okay, it's a motion to amend. That would be to remove Riverview. That's, find it here. There it is. Okay.
Yes, it is. It's third
So it's
one
the
down.
third row, all 3 columns from this work plan, and that's been seconded. Further discussion on that? Councillor Marsden on the amendment.
Very quickly, to confirm Councillor Reid's comment, I don't have any concern with this. This is a carry-forward item from last year, but it was put on there to be reactive in the event the province was coming forward with anything that the committee would hear it. But I think the terms of reference that we've got certainly provide that opportunity should that ever become necessary. But we certainly don't want to give any impression that this committee is going to be doing any active, proactive work with regard to the Riverview sites. So we'll leave it as Councillor Reid has suggested. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm leaving discussion unseparated. Any further discussion on 1 or 2? Separation was requested. We'll do 1 first. The minutes, all in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Item 2, recommendation 2, the work plan. Any further discussion? All in favor? as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 4 is the first report of staff. It pertains to fourth and final reading of City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4700 and 960 and 964 Walls Avenue in particular. Staff recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4700.
Moved by Councillor Zarrillo, second by Councillor Reid. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 5 is Heritage Revitalization Agreement, which is bylaw 4596, and Heritage Designation, which is bylaw 4657 for the Bouthot family residence at 1207 Cartier Avenue. Staff recommendation is that council give fourth and final reading City of Coquitlam Heritage Revitalization Agreement Authorization Bylaw number 4596, and fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Heritage Designation Bylaw number 4657.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, seconded by Councillor Marsden. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 pertains to the Parks, Recreation, and Culture Services 2016 Partnership Report. We have introductory comments by the General Manager as well as a presentation by the Community Partnerships and Policy Manager. Staff recommendation is that Council endorse pursuing the partnership activities and targeted sponsorships in 2017 as per the focus areas highlighted by staff in the report before you. And 2, that authorize that revenue generated from the 2016 part sponsorship activities, which is being held in a reserve fund, be used to support sponsorship actions to enhance the following events: $25,000 towards the 2017 Kaleidoscope Arts and Culture Festival, and $10,000 towards the 2017 Celebrate Coquitlam Canada Day event.
Coquitlam celebrates Canada. Moved by Councillor Marsden. Seconded by Councillor Asmunsen. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you very much. The report here, when I look at page 8, it speaks to working with the CCP program, the branding, and looking at the specific naming rights opportunities. And I think overall there's some great information here. I would ask that as we look to see perhaps what some of the best practices out there, I think we've seen in Chilliwack, Kelowna, and Prince George are 3 that come to mind that have achieved fairly significant naming rights opportunities. So I'd encourage our staff to reach out specifically to those 3 cities and see if there's some similarities that we might be able to act upon. And on the financial implications piece, so good information here where it speaks to, on that same page, and then onto the next one where it speaks to where the reserve balance is and where it came from. I think that's great. As the report talks about in some of the other places, some of the federal monies and that have been received, I'd really like to see those very clearly pulled out as separate line items. I think I want to see that as we move forward with this program and start to see success, that it's very clear what's coming about of the direct efforts of our team within the business community and the outreach, and secondarily with senior levels of government in terms of their funding levels. Okay? Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. The $35,000 that's being taken from the reserve in this report, is that in addition to the 21 hours a week that was approved during budget time? I couldn't quite tell in the report.
Mr. Aloeva.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, it's in addition to, and the idea would be, and that 21 hours is actually really to support the sponsorship program this year with auxiliary dollars, which there's a staff member that's already in that position. We just want to continue that the activities and actions of that staff member. The thinking behind the additional or utilizing some funding in the reserve is really, and I think we should think about it as these dollars would support sponsorship activities that would themselves generate additional revenues that would essentially replenish the fund. So that's the way we really view these sponsorship dollars. They're actually trying to replenish through activities that would happen in these events. So the focus would be to generate value for components of the events that are already planned or budgeted for, rather than enhancing the events, but we could also enhance the events. So, there'd be slightly different focuses of those dollars, but it would be, it'd be separate from the funding of these two events. Kaleidoscope and Canada Day are already funded by council, but it would be to support the delivery of those events through revenues that could they themselves generate additional revenue.
And so, for example, the Kaleidoscope Arts and Culture Festival, that money would go towards time and promotional materials and that sort of thing, the servicing that's required for the sponsorships.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
To the point that Councillor Marsden raised. Looking at page 3, and it's a table that outlines the 2016 partnership activities. I know our staff's been very busy. We've brought some new partners on board, which was great to see, and the list is here. But on this table, there's two sort of line items that I think everything's bulked together, and I don't know if we can get an explanation on two of the items. One is the Park Spark programs, 112,000. Is some of this can be in kind as well, or is that donations, or we're not counting volunteer hours or that type of thing. I'm just sort of wondering how we arrived at the 112, just approximately. I don't need a complete breakdown.
The column is both cash and in kind. So parks. Pardon me. Sorry, I have a cold, so my speaking is a little off. Park Spark programs. About 75,000 of that was in-kind volunteer labor. So this column is combining both cash and in-kind for each of these items.
Right. So volunteer labor being just our volunteers from the community that come out and do work in the park?
Right. So they might be engaged in a tree planting event or a community beautification.
We put a dollar value on the volunteers' time.
Yes.
Maybe we could see that broken out as well, because I like Councillor Marsden. I'd like to be able to sort of track as we move forward and just to sort of see where we're actually achieving financial targets. And I know we have volunteers on all events, and I think that's important to differentiate that. External grants, I'm assuming that may have been monies from other levels of government as well. So it's, in some cases, it's tied to a program or tied to sponsorship, but in some cases it's a grant application that may be a one-time or in a certain year or something. So again, maybe just a little clarity separating external grants out from the actual sponsorship grants would help to just add some clarity to our numbers.
So a little bit of explanation. The partnership report reports on all PRC partnership activities, not just the Coquitlam Corporate Partners Program. So that's why all of this is here. For Council's benefit, starting on about page 4, there's a little bit more detail about each of the various programs and the in-kind and cash revenue generated for each of those programs is laid out a little bit more there. But going forward, we will perhaps find a better way to synthesize that information in a table or some sort of graphic.
And it does say partnership opportunities, and partnerships take various forms, so both financial and in kind. And I think it's good work that's being done. It would just be helpful to see maybe on the chart to see that clarification. But that's great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you very much. So we're having about $35,000 of surplus now. When we started with the Canada Day, and in the report you secured an in-kind value of $48,200. I'm just trying to figure out, we said if we're collecting sponsorships and money that we're going to use that to reduce the cost of these events and lower our intake. So was all that revenue used? So I was trying to find out exactly where are we getting the surplus from. So we're running Canada Day. If there's any surplus from Canada Day, it should have gone back into reducing the cost of Canada Day.
As per the sponsorship policy, the revenue generated from, for example, 2016 events is kept in a reserve account, and council is to make a decision about how that should be used for the following year. So typically it would be used to enhance the asset or event that brought in the sponsorship dollars. So we can't, how I always try to explain it to staff is that we can't count ahead of time what the sponsorship revenue is to depend on using that to offset program costs. So instead, we collect the revenue that year, hold it in a sponsorship account, and then it can be used for the following year's events or activities.
Well, so rather than enhancing an event, could you use that surplus then to go towards the budgets of either event and reducing the overall cost of that event?
It would be up to council how they wanted to use that money. It will come back. We plan going forward to bring this report as forward in tandem with the budget process so that you can make decisions around how to spend that money more holistically with the budget process.
Okay, that would be good. I'd like to see that. And I guess to me, some parts through this, when you read the report, there's a lot of in-kind, and I think breaking that down a little bit more. And I guess from the partnership program, sort of like, we started about 2 years ago, I think, and we're into this now. And I guess I'd like to see, like, even when we talk about the other partnership activities throughout the city, like parks, bars, and everything, what was the level of in-kind or grants that we started prior to 2 years ago, and how much is this program starting to enhance those and bringing in more dollars? I'm trying to see that line item and on those ones there and moving that forward. So it gives us a better idea of the success of the partnership program in all areas.
If I can, Your Worship, I agree with the comments. Because it's a new program, as we get data every year, we can then begin to track, consistently. Now we have data, early data from 2015, 2016 now, so we're going to be able to kind of run some comparisons of the success of various components of the program. So I think that relative data is very important, and to show that we're putting the right attention, the right focus to generate the greatest amount of benefit in the program. So we'll make an effort. And now that we're getting some information annually to provide that comparison to council in the 2017 report.
That'd be good to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo.
Well, thank you. My comments just relate to adult-orientated products. I know there is restrictions in the policy and procedure manual, and we do talk about advertising opportunities to be appropriate to the target audience. And I just wanted to mention about the alcohol advertising. It wasn't this year, but the year before, the stage had wrap that was alcohol, and I found myself in a difficult position. Even as a councillor, did I want to sit on the stage with the advertising for alcohol, because it's a Canada Day family event. So I wouldn't mind seeing, under the restrictions, some work on the expansion of those restrictions as it relates to adult-orientated products like alcohol, that we wouldn't have those visible for family events. So that would just be my comments on that.
Thank you. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. I have similar comments that have already been spoken, but on page 5 of the report, it refers to the volunteer hours associated with the Park Spark and the Adopt a Trail. And it got me thinking that, of course, the Adopt a Street wouldn't be included in that because that's under engineering, but our residents might not know the difference. And I would just love to see a little more data on the amount of volunteering that goes on in our community. So that got me thinking about, there's even more volunteers in our city that are providing hours, providing city-related services. There's the auxiliary RCMP, and there's the senior centers, and in the parks as well, and there's a whole bunch. And I would just love to see what the value of that is, roughly, in future reports. I just think that might be, it's a form of partnership, and the value that it brings is probably mind-boggling, the numbers. Just a thought.
Yep.
No question.
Yep.
Just a comment.
Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. Now, for the, I'm wondering about this. So I can understand why any actual cash sponsorship money can't go into a base budget. It gets put in the reserve and then used to augment. In the same way that a year-end surplus in our budget, we're repeatedly told has to sort of stay separate, can be used for one-time things. However, I'm wondering, as this program grows, we might see a 5 or a 10-year or something like that agreement reached, maybe naming for a facility or something like that. Is the thought at this stage that that would all be seen as one-time money, even though it's continuing, and might it be used to go towards the cost of the event or the facility, as Councillor Asmundson suggested earlier, that wondering why that couldn't happen. But I can see why it can't happen for a one-time event, but if and a one-time sponsorship. But if it's over, if we do get a contract for a healthy amount that's for a decade or more, how do we deal with that?
Your Worship, the sponsorship policy does have some language around the fact that we would advise council if we were to get any kind of long-term or recurring or large sponsorship amount, we would probably advise council that that's being received, that's being worked on, and there'd probably be a strategy around how to build that into either into the reserve or to have council dedicate that through some form of council process.
Okay, so it'll come to us. Thank you.
Okay. Nothing else? Okay. There's a two recommendations: endorse and authorize. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is an application for 150 new taxi licenses by Ripe Holdings. Staff recommendations that council support the application by Ripe Holdings to the Passenger Transportation Board for 150 taxi licenses across the Metro Vancouver region, of which 27 are wheelchair-accessible taxi cabs. And 2, instruct staff to forward a copy of this report and the council resolution to the Passenger Transportation Board.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Marsden.
Thank you. Just one question with regards to this. Currently, our RCMP are involved in the vetting process of taxi licenses, and of course, we've had a couple situations where an appeal would come towards council. Are these licenses? Who ultimately would be working on these with regards to vetting them, ensuring they meet the criteria that we wish to be holding our drivers to? Is it the individual city, or is it? All right.
I'm waiting for whoever pulled the short straw, and it turns out it's Mr. Diaz-Egi.
Don't see the connection, but good.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is directly in line with the mainstream of the engineering department issues. So my way of thinking is that given that the licenses will be issued, will be issued by the Provincial Passenger Transportation Board and not by individual municipalities within the Lower Mainland, I would imagine that the task would be done by, again, the Passenger Transportation Board, not by the city.
Okay, so there's no added piece on ourselves in terms of regards to?
I don't believe so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zrillo. Sorry, Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you very much. It's really heartening to see this report come forward as the province awaits any decision from Victoria on the Uber situation. As you might say, it's stuck in neutral or spinning its wheels. This is an Uber-like service in a way, which is much more rider-friendly in terms of utilizes app-only method of requesting a taxi, and also considers customer-selected option for fare splitting for taxi pooled trips, things like that. So in a way, it's taking some of the things that Uber would offer, combining it with the original taxi industry. I remember when we received a delegation from the taxi industry in our committee chambers last year or so. They readily agreed to the assertion that they need to improve their service, and if this represents an improvement of traditional taxi service, it's a good step, and it does appear to do so. Part of the poor service that I think Council was suggesting that they saw in the taxi industry was just simply a lack of taxis. So not only just the type of service, but in raw numbers. So this application for 150 new taxi licenses from Ripe Holdings seems to address both of the concerns that the council expressed. Indeed, it's welcome as we still see the Uber application spinning its wheels. So this is good to put this one in forward and drive it along. Thank you.
I am pleased to be able to put the brakes on that. Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. Well, it was an interesting report. I hadn't heard anything about this company. So I guess my first question would be are they planning, Ripe Holdings, planning to come and see any of the city councils in the Metro Vancouver region, or are they just sending paper?
Your Worship, I'm not aware of the owners or operators of this company directly approaching our staff, and similarly, I'm not aware of that they would have plans to appear at the front of council in whatever shape or form.
So, through the chair, so no Coquitlam staff have met in person the folks at Ripe Holdings or the organization behind this?
I know that there was communication between Coquitlam staff, but I'm not sure if it was in person or over the phone or emails or similar.
Have there been any other cities that have already adopted, like have already sent a resolution to the Passenger Transportation Board that we know of?
I'm not aware of it, and if you filter through the documentation we attached to the report, you will see that there is a fair number of different dates and deadlines mentioned. We, in the city of Coquitlam, received the information I believe late January, on the 25th of January, and we have a very short deadline to respond. I can probably relatively safely assume that other municipalities are in the same time constraints as we are, and we did not have an opportunity to coordinate with others.
So it's the Transportation Board that is on a deadline?
Yes, that's our understanding.
And do we know why the Transportation Board is on a deadline on this one?
No, I am afraid I don't know. I just assume that they have a standard 30-day deadline.
I have to say, I find it very interesting. I just have a lot of questions, like it seems. So the 150 taxi licenses, what I think I heard from what Councillor Marsden asked is that those 150 licenses could have a multitude of drivers, and they don't need to come, just through the chair, this is a question, if I could just get clarification. It sounds like they don't need to come for the chauffeur license yearly if they're driving these in Coquitlam, or we wouldn't even be able to understand which ones are in Coquitlam, or none of them are registered in Coquitlam. I'm just trying to understand how our RCMP would be able to assess the drivers or have any input into the chauffeurs that are in our region.
My limited understanding of the proposed business model is that these 150 taxi cabs would be spread across the Lower Mainland within the Greater Vancouver Regional District, and based on demand, they would be placed to a variety of locations. And my assumption is that because of that, in some instances, not always the same drivers would be in the same areas.
So they don't have to go through any kind of chauffeur permit in the city of Coquitlam?
I don't know that. What I do know is that the documentation we received is very clear that all the drivers will be properly trained because BCIT courses will be required.
Okay, so I just want to be clear. So basically, it's not a level playing field in regards to the current taxi service in Coquitlam because they have that added must that they need to have their chauffeurs go through a vetting process every year, correct? And these ones won't need to, so we're in a different...
Mr. Diosegi.
Unfortunately, I don't know the current requirements for Coquitlam-based and licensed taxi cab drivers, so I'm unable to compare them.
Okay, so my other question is just around this pooling. It sounds very interesting. I'm just wondering, what are the safety protections around pooling if you happen to be in the taxi cab with a stranger? I'm not sure. Like, I think if you're in a taxi cab with a taxi driver, there's some protection around who that person is that's driving you. If you're sharing the back seat with a stranger, do we know what their safety regulations are, or what kind of protection you have as a pooling passenger?
Again, I don't know what the answer may be.
I think it probably the same as any common carrier, I would imagine, whether it's the transfer van from the hotel to the airport, or or for that matter, public transit. I don't know that it would be different.
I'd like to understand if it's different insurance or different regulations when you're doing a shuttle versus taxis are traditionally a single ride service. So I would like to understand, what are the differences between that? Do you think there's different insurance with a shuttle versus a single person taxi?
What we do know is that the taxi cabs will be equipped, just like any other licensed taxi cab, with cameras and, of course, a meter. But I'm not aware of any extra steps or less steps that's required because of the potential ride sharing or cab pooling.
Yes, I'll ask the chair. Is pooling defined in the defined by the Passenger Transportation Board? Like, is it something that already exists?
Well, you've got me. It doesn't exist in our city's policies that I know of. And although I know anecdotally that there are lots of cities in the world where taxis commonly pool passengers at the willingness of the passenger, I'm just not sure that there's any rules for or against it locally.
I'd really like to know if it's defined by the Passenger Transportation Board, but that's okay. Then perhaps my last question on that same page 4 of 7. In the third paragraph, it says, these customer service employees are not acting as dispatchers. They are simply acting as educators and assisting with operating the app, similar to how Ripe Ride's official staff currently operates. So I'm just wondering what kind of human contact is. I mean, we haven't seen a human from Ripe Rides, and I'm just wondering what kind of humans are available for customer service to speak to live or to be tangible in our community as it relates to this opportunity.
I'm afraid I can work only with some high-level assumptions in this case. My limited understanding is that the operation will be entirely based on using an application. So what you do is, if you wish to use this service, you download the application, and then you call the cab through the application. And then automatically, through your software, the nearest available cab will be dispatched to your location. When you make the application or the electronic call for a cab, you can select whether you wish to ride from A to B on your own, or you name that you want to travel from A to B, but you're prepared to pool with somebody else if there is somebody else interested in a similar trip. I did not get the sense that when you order this cab, you actually call and you talk to somebody.
No,
it's all electronic.
Yeah.
But I also have to assume that there must be a phone number where if you have an issue or complaint or anything, then you can actually talk to somebody who can potentially resolve your problem.
Well, I think it's very interesting. I think it's got some great potential, and I do think that our residents would probably like to see it. But I'd like to maybe ask the chair. I'd almost like to request that they come in so we can see this company live, and maybe we could get some information from the Passenger Transportation Board or from the province, just some information about who this is and where they came from, and that. I wouldn't feel comfortable just on a dozen pieces of paper making a resolution that we should let these taxis come into the region without at least seeing a human being beside them. So could what would the chair suggest? Could we defer and request that they come in and talk? I think it's exciting, but I wouldn't mind talking to them.
Well, if we decided to defer, we would be giving up our right to comment. We have 30 days to comment from January 25th, as I understand, which gives us till Thursday. So we either comment or don't tonight. We typically don't ask for the proponent or the landowner or someone like that. It's not typically a condition of our approval of a business license or approval of even variances. They can and often do appear, but for that matter, it's typically not the owner. It's typically the consultant or even the PR person. So I'm not certain that if we made a request that we would get proprietors or high-level executives of a company. We might get a consultant. So it depends on our level of concern.
It's interesting because it says expanding, right? So they have a limousine service now. It seems like they have a limousine service now, and they want to expand that out to taxis. And the only way, I'm wondering, does the limousine service, the limousine service must work by phone right now, but the taxis are going to work only by this application? I've got so many questions, so
Yeah, no, according to the staff report, the limousine service currently operates by app, by a smartphone. Point-to-point luxury sedan limousine service via smartphone. So I guess it's simply using the existing infrastructure that they
same one that they already use.
Yep.
And just expanding it. Well, I personally, I'd like to, if it's just a comment, I'd like to say we're definitely interested in hearing more, but lots of questions. I'm interested what the rest of my colleagues think, but I certainly wouldn't feel comfortable saying, yeah, go ahead when we have so many unanswered questions. See how everyone else feels.
And I examined the passenger transportation regulation, and they don't define pool other than as in a carpool, because carpools vehicles are exempt.
Do they have anything that sounds like pooling?
It simply says that the limit on a vehicle is the number of people the vehicle is licensed for. So in this case, where are we at here? Limitation on the number of passengers is Section 8. At no time during its operation may a commercial passenger vehicle contain more persons than the carrying capacity of the commercial passenger vehicle. Full stop. So they seem to be silent on the idea that they need to know each other in some way or something. So.
Thank you. I'm going to start seeing if I can find the app.
Sounds good. Councillor Towner.
Thank you. In attachment 4, the bottom of page 2, the applicant says they plan to have all of their wheelchair accessible taxis available as close to 24/7 as possible. And in the past, we've heard that some taxi companies are reluctant to put these vehicles on the road because they're more expensive to operate and take longer to load and unload a passenger with a mobility aid. And I've been a member of the Legion, and we've heard lots of challenges of patrons there trying to get a accessible taxi cab home. So my question is, do we know if any other communities have found a way to ensure that the wheelchair accessible taxis are actually on duty around the clock?
Mr. Diozaki.
Through your worship, what we know is that across the lower mainland, finding at times wheelchair accessible cabs are very, very difficult. We also believe that indeed operating those cabs are somewhat more expensive than the regular cab, but I don't believe that any of the regulator bodies have adequate tools to make sure that all of those wheelchair accessible cabs are available 24 hours a day. And also we know that even this application contains information that if regular fare would use the otherwise wheelchair accessible cab, they can and will, because simply that's part of their business model. So from time to time, I anticipate that there will be shortages again of wheelchair accessible cabs, but from staff's perspective, having, generally speaking, more available in the Northeast, in Coquitlam, is a good thing.
Definitely, thank you. I'm also just curious about an inconsistency in the reports here. In one of the documents it says it would have to have a driver and not less than 2 passengers, and the other one it says a driver and has to accommodate not less than 3 passengers. It's just a curiosity. Like this company can't just take 1 person?
Well, that's the vehicle capacity, not the vehicle occupancy.
It both says capacity. The one page it says a driver and not less than 2, and then on the other one it says a driver and not less than 3. It's a different document. But anyways, I just wonder if that was a typo or it just confused me.
I'm not sure.
Okay. One's the application summary to the Passenger Transportation Board, and one is the Passenger Transportation Branch License. It's okay. Thought there was an easy explanation.
Have you ever seen an inconsistent regulation before?
Not in Coquitlam.
No, certainly not. No, that's something you're consistent about. There it is. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, I know somebody that has a few taxi licenses, and this is a big curiosity to me because they buy their license as a business license. They have 1 license, 1 cab. And for many, many years, if you wanted a new license, even the taxi cabs we have now in Coquitlam come forward, and they have to substantiate why they want more, and we can say we'd like more of the handicap cars. And it's so regulated. So how someone can come along, and they can only pick up in their own community, they can drop off in another one, but Coquitlam cabs aren't allowed to pick up outside their boundaries. So this group has come along because they've got a limousine service, and now they've decided they want to be a taxi service and have 150 places, 150 units, whether they're all limos or not, pick up and drop off anywhere in the whole lower mainland, which substantially changes the whole system that we've got. Now, whether that's right or wrong, I don't know, and I won't judge, but the things that I wanted to know are a couple of the things that Councillor Zerillo mentioned. They have to take the Justice Institute course, I get that. I want to know what kind of insurance they have to carry and what kind of insurance the company carries. Is it the same as a regular taxi cab that we have now? And the second thing I want to know is, do they have to have their licenses checked and renewed every year as the same as a taxi driver does in the taxi companies that are here now? Now, I have no problem in getting another business in Coquitlam, and one that we definitely need that can pick up and drop off anywhere, because that stops when the kids go downtown and they want to take a cab home. They can't, So this has all kinds of good merits. But if we're only supposed to respond, I would like to respond with a couple of caveats, that we respond saying, yes, we agree, but we'd like to know how this differs from the taxi licenses we have now. 2, do they have to have the appropriate insurance, same as taxis now, or more? And 3, does the RCMP do their checks every year or 2 of all taxi licenses? And we can say we're definitely interested, but we want these questions answered. Am I talking to myself here? No? I'm done then.
Okay. Councillor O'Neill.
For letting me recognize me twice on this issue. It's a very simple thing here. When I read this, I know we're not the agency with any great amount of oversight on this. The Passenger Transportation Board presumably knows what it's doing. And I looked at this as supporting it essentially in principle. It's a good idea. It's, we'll let the provincial authority in charge work it out. If there are some slight differences in the taxi licenses, the types of licenses this company is getting versus a regular taxi company, the Passenger Transportation Board that sits with them, they'll have reasons for doing it, or they won't have reasons for doing it. So I'm still going to, essentially supporting this application is supporting it in principle. It's the principle of things, sounds fantastic for me. I think it serves the public. I cannot imagine a scenario where the Passenger Transportation Board doesn't consider the sorts of issues, passenger safety issues, insurance issues, things like that have been brought up around the table. So if you want to add the words in principle to support the application in principle, we can do that if it makes people happier. But this is essentially a support in principle because we don't have the detailed oversight on this or jurisdiction. But that's where I stand.
And I
parked myself there.
I would argue that there's a third option, and that is that we not object to. That we support in principle, or that we not object to. If council wants somewhere else to land. Councillor Asmussen.
For the first time.
Hearing nothing further, councillors.
Well, my issue is that one of the biggest issues we have in the whole region, we hear about the lack of taxis. And the lack of taxis for people in Coquitlam getting home from Vancouver because they don't cross boundaries. It's been a huge problem for years. You talk about the mayor of Vancouver and everybody talking about the need for more taxis in this region for people to get around, especially getting people that are drinking off the road late at night. So I think another 150 taxis on the road, limousine service, that can go across all regions in this area is a very good thing to have in our region for our public and for the service to the public. Secondly, Councillor Neal nailed it. What I was going to say is the same thing. This is going to the Passenger Transportation Safety Board. This is our recommendation. They are the ones that make sure and deal with all the rules and regulations for their licensing, their insurance, all their proper documentation on that. That's their responsibility. All we're being asked to is either comment, do we support 150 more taxis in our region that can cross boundaries? Because we know we've had a lot of complaints come to this council over the years talking about people that they cannot from downtown Vancouver get a taxi home to Coquitlam at nighttime because the Vancouver cabs will not go out to Coquitlam. So this gives people in Coquitlam that opportunity, and I think it's a great opportunity. And I'm not going to defer this because if we don't comment, the Transportation Board is going to make their decision with it regardless. We don't have a veto over this decision. We can either support this application or you can vote against not supporting it. But in the end of the day, this is the responsible of the Transportation Safety Board for all their rules and regulations that they have and to look after this. So I think this is a great application. I'm going to support this. I'm not going to defer it or delay it.
Thank you. I always get frustrated when we talk about taxis because I think government has a role in regulating particularly things that are not necessarily things that society thinks are good, and yet we think taxis are good. Were taxis a good thing or are they a bad thing? And I think almost everyone would say a taxi is a really good thing for a community. It makes us safer. It allows people to perhaps leave their car at home, take public transit, and sometimes add a taxi in. But also, when they cannot drive or shouldn't drive, it gives them options to leave their keys and their cars alone. So I believe passionately that taxis are one of those things. We may want to regulate some things, and how many of, for example, how many payday loan places do we have? Well, we don't regulate that. How many cigarette selling places do we have? Well, we don't regulate that either. How many fried chicken and fast food places do we have? Well, we don't set a limit. We set a limit for some reason. Society sets a pretty strict limit on how many taxis we have. And I look around council, and I'd say the majority of us have driven on Operation Red Nose, and you get to New Year's Eve and you see people that you're leaving behind at a nightclub at 2 a.m, and you know darn well that there's no one coming to get them, and they're begging for a lift. And we know that by 3 they'll be so cold they'll reach into their pocket, they'll grab their car keys, and they'll drive home. And someone will die because we don't have enough taxis on. The taxi industry doesn't actually complain about Operation Red Nose during the Christmas season because they know there's not enough taxis. So it's only Friday and Saturday night, and they can't fill the demand anyway. So I don't know why, as a society, we limit the number of taxi licenses as strictly as we do, but we do. This one here is, I suspect, an ingenious workaround on the province's delay to get ride-sharing approved. It's a workaround in that it uses everything about ride-sharing, except I gather the car is owned by the taxi company, but I'm not certain that it is. Doesn't have taxi on it. It doesn't have a light on top of it. It's like Uber or Lyft in that you order it by app, and you can even see the driver, and the sorts of safety issues that come with those ride-sharing apps apply to this one as well. But they're actually going through the process of getting taxi licenses. This is a step in the right direction. I suspect that these 150 taxi licenses will be obviated by the eventual adoption of regulations in support of ride-sharing apps and taxi replacement sorts of apps that make it so that people will not be left on that doorstep at 2 a.m. on January 1st to fend for themselves in the snow and the ice. Councillor Zerillo, second time.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to answer one of my own questions. I'm looking at a Vancouver Sun article from November 2015, and it says that Ripe Rides will be offering properly insured vehicles a regulated rate system with a licensed trained driver. And the drivers will be Ripe Ride employees and will hold a City of Vancouver chauffeur permit and will have passed the Vancouver criminal checks. So this is only a newspaper article from a year ago, so this could be, this is talking about, it's not quite a taxi service, not quite a limo, but Otis of Ripe Rides believes his licensed mid-level luxury sedan for hire service is just what the city needs. I think it is this that we're talking about, that he was talking about a year ago. Amid the heated controversy about Uber, he seeks to operate in the city. So this is the expansion.
Well, I would assume that since they're applying for taxi licenses, they'll have to meet the requirements of a taxi, which includes a chauffeur permit.
But it sounds like it's going to be in Vancouver.
This may be the
Their existing limousine service, they have 20 cars.
In any case, this clearly they're looking to expand, and they're doing it as taxis, so they will have limousine, or rather chauffeured licenses and the appropriate regulations that go with that.
Well, I hear Councillor O'Neill talking out of turn, but no, this is not this is not the limousine service that they do. This is his idea about expanding a year ago into this new service. So.
Which isn't necessarily inconsistent with today's staff report, because if it turned out to be a 20-car success expansion a year ago, and now they're looking to expand it across the Lower Mainland, that would be consistent as well. Okay. Councillor Zerillo, anything?
Nope.
Nope.
That is finished.
There we go. Thank you very much. Anybody else? It's on the,
The item has been moved and seconded. It was moved by Councillor O'Neill and seconded by Councillor Marsden.
all in favor?
Just
Councillor Wilson.
clarification. Councillor Reid made some good suggestions in terms of wanting some assurances that it was on a level playing field with the taxi services. Did you want to do that as a friendly amendment to the recommendation, or just leave the recommendation as is?
Okay. There was a discussion. There were discussions that included a reference to level playing field, reference to chauffeurs' licenses, insurance, and appropriate. And I'm kind of like Councillor O'Neill on this. I don't want to tell the Passenger Transportation Safety Board how to make taxis safe. But if Council wants to say in a new recommendation 2 that the above is based on our assumption that they are chauffeur licenses with criminal record checks and those sorts of things. Okay, so Councillor Reid has moved an amendment to add a recommendation that Council makes this decision under the assumption that the vehicles will be driven by someone with a chauffeur's license, criminal record check, and appropriate insurance. Seconded by Councillor Hodge. Anybody else? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. The motion. Oops. Sorry, I didn't see the hand. Okay, that's why I said when I said I didn't see the hand. Okay. Councillor Zerillo's opposed. Motion carries. So now we're back to the original motion as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Oh, Councillor Zerillo's opposed. Motion carries.
Mr. Chair, just to be clear on what we will communicate, we'll say that Council, under the assumption that the chauffeur's permit, criminal record check, and insurance requirements of taxi cab companies are in place, support the application and instruct staff. We'll put it as at the front of it rather than at the back.
Or in the middle where I wrote it. Okay, that's fine. No hearing, no objection. That's the motion that we just passed. Very good. Before item 8, I believe Councillor Marsden.
Yes, thank you. I've recently entered into an agreement with an individual to provide some marketing and film services with relation to a property. In the absence of legal opinion and overabundance of caution, I'm going to recuse myself from the discussion on this next. Although it is high level, I want to make sure that it's not seen to be skewed in any way, shape, or form. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Marsden absences himself. Leaves the room under the provisions related to conflict of interest, although he didn't declare a conflict.
Thank you. Item 8 is the draft 2017 to 2022 Coquitlam Film Strategy. We have introductory comments by the Deputy City Manager, and the staff recommendation is that Council approve the 2017 to 2022 Coquitlam Film Strategy as attached to the report before you.
Moved.
Moved by Councillor Aspenson, second by Councillor Reid. All in favor? Opposed?
It's okay.
Carried unanimously. We don't need him back.
No.
Staff are going to start picking up on the fact that when they say introductory comments, the votes go very quick and no one gets to speak, so it's...
It would help.
Councillor Morrison has moved a motion on his way back in that he should leave more often. All in favor?
Move things along. I should have left on the last time.
Item 9 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief from their meeting of January 27th. Our Metro Vancouver Board representatives are available to respond to any questions from Council, and the staff recommendations that Council receive the brief for information.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Hodge, second by Councillor Aspenson. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. We received some emails about people, particularly in some of our outer areas, with respect to fireplaces, wood-burning fireplaces and things like that. There are lots of people in our community and in the Tri-Cities that have wood-burning fireplaces. And I guess the clarification they're asking, and I'll ask you, Your Worship, is it a total ban?
You know,
I know, I mean, I sat there too and listened to it. I mean, that's what they'd like to do, but...
I've said this before, if you do have a question on one of these items, and I know this one probably just came up during the last meeting, so it's no big deal, but if you do have a question, if you let either Councillor Hodge or myself know ahead of time, we can probably pull out the document from some staff report. I wish, because there is a document that properly explains this better than I can, but I know that Councillor Hodge also knows a lot about this, and he can explain it.
Perfect.
Question and at least have the report on my laptop.
There you go. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, this has been been a topic of discussion for quite a few years. Back in 2009, Metro began working on a strategy to reduce smoke from residential fireplaces. This is really just that Metro wants to go back out, do some public consultation. They've looked at a couple of options. You know, there's some voluntary measures in place right now, including a rebate program on fireplaces. So that's in place. In the report, it says that, let me just call it up here, regulating wood fireplaces, Metro would provide safeguards to minimize impacts on air quality. The objectives of such regulatory strategy would be to minimize risk to health. It says, the following policy options may be considered in developing a regulatory approach to control wood smoke from residential burning and would be the subject of preliminary consultations with stakeholders. Restrictions on operating residential wood burning appliances based on emissions criteria. Exemptions from such regulations under certain conditions, such as lack of other sources of comfort heating, distance from neighbors, and exceptional events, and it lists a couple of others. But they have recognized that there may be financial implications or in areas where that's the only option, and that they would look at exemptions in those matters. But primarily, it's just that there's not an outright ban proposed. They're talking about just tightening regulations and working towards improving air quality.
Yeah, so it hasn't changed in the last 8 or 9 years.
It's heading inexorably toward a goal, I suspect. But
still got a few years left.
I believe so. And there still is a recognition, for example, that the standard brick fireplace built into the 1950s era homes in Coquitlam, which has you can't heat your home from it. You can get a nice, pleasant-looking fire that produces lots of smoke, is very different from a heating appliance that produces a tiny fraction of the amount of particulate emission in particular, and can also, there are wood-burning furnaces here in Coquitlam, and they heat the homes. As well, I guess August 28th was the last major windstorm a year and a half ago. Dead of summer is not the same kind of challenge as a 3-day power outage in winter would be. And so, you know, we as a region may well need to anticipate the reality that we have to be self-sufficient for 3 days, and those people with fireplaces may well be the homes that everybody ends up congregating in.
I will add further to that. I think that's covered off under and exceptional events.
Yes.
That would probably cover that. One of the things also being suggested is the use of indicators of excessive smoke production. So that might be monitoring. And the third one is, or the fourth one is that they'd also be looking at the possibility of additional restrictions during periods of degraded air quality. So at certain times of the year, they could impose a ban, much as we see watering bans and things come in place at certain times of the year. So, so they're looking at a number of options, and at this point, no decisions have been made.
Mm-hmm.
And on page 3, I've been reappointed to the Flood Control Committee, and also that Bob Long is now a Coquitlam councillor. Perhaps you could let them know. He's wonderful, and we'd love to have him, but I think they meant Langley. That's it. Thank you.
There we go. I hadn't noticed that. What about that? Okay. Any other discussion on the board and brief? The question is Metro's board and brief. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Now open the floor to... Oh, on table. Sorry. Yep. Right in front of me.
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have one on-table item, which we've marked as OB1. This is an appointment to the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Staff recommendations that Council approve the appointment of Mr. Jay Ashworth to the Economic Development Advisory Committee.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Reid. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Ashworth, in advance for your service on our committee.
Move adjournment.
Adjournment has been moved. Moved by Councillor Rasmussen, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. I'll open the floor to questions from the audience on tonight's agenda. Any questions from anyone in the audience on tonight's agenda? Any questions? Seeing none. I thank you all for coming. Oh, and Wednesday is Pink Shirt Day. I'm wearing it a bit in advance, but Wednesday, let's tackle a serious social issue and let's wear pink. Thank you.
Great.